When the night was closing in, I was alone and so afraid.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm sorry this upload took so long. I had to deal with an emergency for most of yesterday and was super tired afterwards. We got quite a few Citrine builds for you today. As it turns out, she is a playstyle frame. This means how you play her is honestly more important than how you build her. She doesn't ask for much because a lot of her abilities already have high base range or duration, leaving many slots for quality of life. The closest comparison is like Styanax on launch. An incredibly fun frame that didn't need much stats. Unfortunately, a lot of that fun was stripped away without addressing its issues, and I hope Citrine won't suffer the same fate. She is a good frame. Not amazing, not average, or bad. Good. She has potential, and I hope DE can build on that. Let's see her kits. For one, Fractured Blast is a very wide cone quick stun ability. It stops enemies from attacking you for about 2 seconds and marks them. Killing any marked enemy has an increased chance to drop health and energy orbs. They are not mutually exclusive and an enemy can drop both if the RNG rolls right. The ability also force procs Slash, which does piss poor damage. The bleed itself will only kill Star Chart enemies, and its real purpose is for activating the requirements of her 3 without needing to shoot a weapon. Strength affects the drop rate, but it is already rather high to begin with. This is the ability Citrine offers to the Helminth. Her 2, Preserving Shell, is underwhelming design-wise, but it works. It is a simple damage reduction ability that also applies to all allies within affinity radius 50 meters on cast. It also has AoE stagger within 8 meters, knockback within 2 meters, and is recastable, although the stun from the cast isn't really useful. The amount of damage reduction scales linearly and is baseline at 40% damage reduction per 100% strength. Casting the ability will instantly scale the damage reduction to strength, however it decays by 1% per second down to 0. DR above 75% drains at a significantly faster rate and is also capped to a 90% maximum. Kills and assists by you will increase current DR up to 90%, making modding for strength unnecessary on this ability. Recasting while active refreshes the full duration while preserving the current DR value beforehand. I would like to see more synergy from this ability in the future, where her 1 or her 4 gain extra effects if you kill enemies while at 90% damage reduction. Be it a spreading 4 chain, or her 1 allowing longer lasting radial blinds on kills, there is definitely more it should do besides just being a press button for damage reduction ability. Her 3, Prismatic Gem, is the strongest part of her kit. It is not needed for survivability and focuses entirely on DPS. A tank setup can skip this for picking out a Helminth slot. It does 2 things: prime enemies that you or your teammates inflict statuses upon within the radius of the aura, and buff you and teammates within the aura. Her 1 can trigger the gem's priming by force bleeds on enemies. The gem priming includes 4 primary elements only and individually hits enemies in succession. Therefore, AoE weapons do not significantly improve the gem's priming ability, as it can only switch between 4 or 5 enemies per second, meaning a full 20 enemy squad hit by the AoE will take about 5 seconds to be fully tagged by the gem. I wish it would tag them all at once, rather than switching between each target one by one. Also, while it has a high base radius at 15 meters, you can only have 1 active at a time. Recasting destroys the previous gem. I would prefer being able to cast 2, like Zaku's Gaze Zones, for more dynamic play in different areas of a tile. The damage of the beam cannot consistently kill anything besides the weakest fodder on Steel Path. For the damage buffing side, it provides the equivalent of modded status chance and status duration, scaling linearly at 100% per 100% strength. This is the first time we have a sustained status-based buff on a Warframe. The only other contender is Mesa with Ballistic Bullseye, but is not practical to use for horde killing due to recasting every shot. The status chance opens up the door to full crit builds that lack status, creating hybrid setups, whereas the status duration is just asking for Expedite suffering synergy. Status chance is affected by strength, whereas status duration is affected by duration. And remember, all of this is additional on top of your pre-existing stats, unlike Lavos' duration stat affecting the original status duration of your weapons. Her 4, Crystallize, is rather simple, but a slow casting ability. It is a non-line of sight crowd control that tags both Acolytes and Xmas units as well. It is a 2-part ability that consists of a Crystal Growth and Petrify State. Xmas units cannot be petrified by this ability, however still exhibit the Crystal Growths. Hitting crystal sets your crit chance on the weapon to 300%. Strength does not affect the 300% flat crit, and only the raw damage of the ability itself. The higher the crit chance on your current weapon, the less the value shooting the crystal has. The crystal also always has a 1x body part multiplier, whereas the heads of most enemies have a 3x multiplier. For certain weapons with enough crit chance already, it is actually a damage loss to shoot the crystal instead of the head. Lower crit weapons benefit from this mechanic a lot more, such as Kuba Nucor with just 7% crit chance, but a 10x crit multiplier. The red crits caused by this ability have full scaling for status dot calculation, unlike Banshee's Sonar, allowing weaker weapons to deal significantly higher damage over time through dots. Any damage type that is AoE cannot trigger the red crit 300% scaling of the crystal, but can still hit it, and will instead deal their normal crit scaling. Aimed abilities, such as the Surging Blades Augment, can also hit the crystal, but will also ignore the 300% red crit scaling, and only deal their normal damage. Citrine's passive grants her base 5 health regen per second, and gains a permanent further 0.1 health regen per health orb required in mission, up to a cap of 25 HP regen per second. This will reset if you die though. This would require 200 health orb drops, which can be reached after a few minutes with the aid of her first ability. I've got 4 different Citrine builds today, focused on shield tank play, an ability based all-rounder play, a Helminth offensive setup, and a Demolyst nuker setup. All of them are intended for Steel Path. I would strongly recommend 2 casting speed Archon shards on her, as most of her abilities are on the slower side to cast, especially her 4. If you're comfortable with it, every transient fortitude on builds today can be instead replaced with Blind Rage for longer duration and higher strength, but 45 efficiency. It is maintainable by casting your 1 more often, but requires a playstyle change. If I refer to shield gating strats today, keep in mind it's with a Decay Dragon key equipped to drop her shield max to 75. Focus schools are mostly free, but I took Madurai when I could for the bonus cast speed and strength on Void Sling and transference. Let's go. Build 1 is for health tanking chill play. The purpose of this setup is to pile on enough damage reduction and healing to outdo incoming damage. Since the focus isn't to use abilities to actively control the battlefield and buff yourself, I have subsumed off her 3 for Roar. This lets you run and gun easily with a mobile universal buff, which also double dips on dot builds. Your 4 is only needed for acolytes and other pesky units, otherwise your 2 lets you shrug off damage as you cast your 1 for energy as needed. Base 5 HP regen that scales up to 25 HP per second fully offsets combat discipline, letting you easily run max rank alongside Arcane Avenger for a permanent plus 45% flat crit buff due to the self damage. But since you are health tanking, combat discipline isn't actually needed. It's only for the guaranteed consistency, but otherwise enemies hitting you lets you run whatever aura you want too. Radar and Corrosive Projection are handy options. You essentially cast your 1 frequently as needed for quick stuns and orb drops. The health orbs will stack up with Arcane Blessing, capping you at a max 2010 health. Health orbs will also activate Health Conversion, which grants 450 armor per stack at max 3 stacks. But you only lose 1 stack every 3 seconds you get hit, whereas your 1 grants you near infinite health orbs everywhere so long as you keep killing. The build reaches 1600 armor for 84.2% raw damage reduction, then another 90% damage reduction from her 2, and then adaptation piled on top. Basically, you easily out-heal the incoming damage and can chill in Steel Path for several hours in survival. Equilibrium lets you continue converting health orbs to energy even at full HP due to synth fiber from your pet, but since you're health tanking, you will probably never be at full HP anyways. Flow for leeway if multiple casts are needed, and the rest goes into strength. This gives you a fat roar buff, and even if your 2 expires, you instantly get 84% damage reduction back from it at the start. Range is neutral because your 1 already tags entire crowds with base range, and your 4 is only used to petrify and buff damage against problematic Expedite acolytes. Focus School is also irrelevant on this build. You literally just go around casting your 1 and things and killing. Occasionally recast Roar and your 2. Build 2 is a normal use setup with their base kit and no Helminth. It's more all-rounder. The first thing I want to point out are the Arcanes. You actually only use 1 of these, and the other slot is free for a DPS Fire Rate Arcane or whatever. This build can be made for health tank or shield gate. The shield gate setup would use Brief Respite Aura, Augur Secrets for 4 Augur bonus including Pistol Augurs, and Energize to maintain the energy economy in case you have to spam abilities to shield gate. If you were health tanking though, you could bring Corrosive Projection and keep Umbral Intensify. You would also use Arcane Blessing to reach 1400 HP without needing Vitality and tank with her regen and health orb drops. This build goes for 175 range to grant massive range to your 1 cast for quick stuns and even more orb drops. This build also makes use of your 3, granting a 26.25 meter radius aura. Throwing your 1 on any crowd in this radii will easily tag all of them and cause your 3 to prime them all within a few seconds. This is perfect for gun CO setups and covers nearly half a tile. You also get 199% extra status chance and 127% status duration within the aura, which is generally about a 2x final multiplier for dot builds. Your 4 is still available as always if you want some juicy red crits and bigger damage. Equilibrium once again is used to maintain energy economy through orbs from your 1. It's even more important if you're running shield gating instead since you won't be taking HP damage as often. Prime Flow for bigger bank for spamming abilities since we only have 100 efficiency, and this time, Rolling Guard to remove status effects and grant iframes as needed. Build 3 is a small tweak on Build 2 if you have access to Helminth. The mods are identical on this, but we subsume a grouping Helminth over her too. This drags enemies into the aura of your 3 for priming and big PP damage. Airburst, Larva, and Coil Horizon all function similarly here. Though Coil Horizon in particular will not only group them up but also inflict electric procs, which can trigger your 3 to prime them for extra statuses for gun CO. Grouping Helminths are also easier to shield gate with because they last longer than her 1, and also enable further crowd control and killing of enemies by putting them all in one place. Ensnare and Pull also work, but keep in mind Ensnare can only be casted on a place enemies already are at, and that Pull is a directional grouping tool best used for hallways or straighter pathing. Airburst, Larva, and Coil Horizon are best for T-junctions and more open areas. I was using the Stephalos today, which can get close to 100% crit chance with Arcane Avenger. Whether you use Combat Discipline to self-damage or an aura of your choice is up to you. Again, if you are health tanking instead, you would run Arcane Blessing. Shield gating prefers Energize, but you can still survive without it. Build 4 makes the greatest usage of her kit for Demolyst killing. There are 2 variants of this setup, depending on if you subsume over her 2 or her 3. For early Steel Path runs, you can safely subsume damage buff tools over her 3 because its extra damage scaling will not be needed to kill Demolysts. This lets you keep her 2's 90% damage reduction for comfort. For endurance runs, her 2 is useless, so you would subsume over that instead. My favorite Demolyst subsume to use with her today is Expedite Suffering. This is because it is able to take advantage of both status chance bonuses from her 3 to stack more dots, but the bonus status duration also acts as a final multiplier for when combining all the dot duration into a single hit. For Demolysts, where you always want to slow them down with Cold Procs and Magus Lockdown, shooting the head isn't that much worse than shooting the crystal from her 4 for red crits. The gap is even smaller for high crit weapons, since the crystal sets your crit chance to 300% instead of adding a flat 300%. Therefore, I would not recommend casting your 4 on them unless absolutely necessary. A lot of the time, you could have just kept shooting instead of casting your 4, and it would result in very similar damage. Therefore, your 3 is by far the strongest buff for Demolyst killing. The Nullifier Pulse cannot remove the crystal from your 3 on the field even if it's close to them, but can pulse off the crystal growth from your 4 and the Petrify. In fact, it can even nullify your 4 before the crystal appears when it's still traveling to them. We basically swapped out Stretch for Narrow-Minded only. 209 status duration bumps our slash or toxin dots to 3.09 times total duration, or 3.09 times more damage when casting Expedite. We also maintain 76% range, which lets Expedite still hit out to 9 meters from outside their 6 meter radius nullifying pulse. With Brief Respite, this is 310 energy to shield conversion and allows your 1 to restore all shields in a single cast. It's particularly useful since we do not have a dedicated crowd control ability on the Demolyst setup. To kill a Demolyst, you prime them to slow them down and set up. Personally, I use an Epitaph or Compressa, then you can keep them in place by Void Slinging with Magus Lockdown. Cast your 3 towards them if you have it, and shoot their head until they die if you're on a raw damage Thorough Strike, Roar, or Eclipse build. Or cast Expedite after dumping enough procs in for a Slash or Toxin setup. Toxin works better against Corpus demos to bypass their shields. Casting your 4 only boosts your damage by about 20 to 80% depending on the weapon, so I would only recommend it in Endurance if required. As you can see here, we're still doing damage well into the millions, whereas early Steel Path Demolysts only have a couple 100,000 health. Our setups today easily enable millions of damage, so you should be able to skip her for most of the time. I used the Toxin Progenitor Tenet Flux to kill the Demolyst today, which is neither a weak nor particularly broken slash weapon. It's just a good slash weapon, and still allowed us to hit these 2.7 and 4.6 million Expedites even without our weapon Arcane active, which I forgot about, which makes up about 35% of our damage missing, assuming Gun CO is in play. Therefore, meta choices like Convectrix or Spectra Vandal would rip these Demolysts apart instantly, including the weapon Arcanes. The build was a very basic viral setup with a Flux Overdrive augment for more status chance. A quick half-mag dump resulted in well over 100 slash procs to Expedite. The Epitaph build I used on all builds today looked like this. Generic viral radiation with innate blast and force cold procs. The important bits are the 2 Augur mods here to enable a 3 or 4 set Augur bonus for our shield gating builds today. Panzer build also same as always, viral quills because it spreads so easily. Synth set stats stay carriers, martyr to keep you alive, devolution for infinite cat lives, radar, vacuum, and that's it. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always, as soon as possible like I've done with the Citrine's last Witch updates. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.